Good morning. So this past Sunday, excuse me, more than 100 ALPA pilots, staff, and their families gathered outside the front of the building here to honor those we lost 15 years ago. In those somber moments of reflection, we reaffirmed our commitment to never forget the sacrifices of those who perished. Let's watch a short video, please. So, Betty, are you in the room? No, she's not in the room. For those who didn't know that voice, there she is. Stand up. Come on, quit just raising your hands. That voice was that of our representation director, Betty Ginsburg. Thank you very much for the same. She didn't want to raise her hand. How shy can you get? And she's very good. Okay, this then is a particularly apt time to remind ourselves of who and where we are, who we inspire to be, what we inspire to be as the ultimate guardians of our profession. Let's be clear, we are stronger and more powerful than ever before in our 85-year history. We're gaining members. We are the leaders of the airline pilot associations from across the globe. We are the organization that accepts the never-ending challenges to protect our members and our industry. We aspire to be more. To prevail in open aviation safety issues and security issues, important to our members and really to all pilots. To prevail in collective bargaining to obtain better agreements and to enforce their terms. We aspire to expand on our success in bringing more pilots into ALPA. To secure the future of the profession by prevailing no matter when and no matter how it is challenged. To be more, and yet to achieve more, we have to do more. The upcoming Board of Directors meeting is an opportunity for us to work together on a flight plan that will do just that, leading to achieving our aspirations. Each and every one of us is a leader who can make a contribution to reaching this goal. We all are. Now let's take a look at some of the major issues facing us today and into the future. All pilots put safety and security first, so I will too. First issue, the carriage of lithium batteries. This deserves and should get more attention. We've seen some great progress on this issue this year, but there's no question, at least in my mind, and I know many of yours, that more needs to be done. There is no rational reason, okay? There is none. No rational reason why both lithium metal and lithium-ion batteries are prohibited on cargo on a passenger aircraft, yet can still be carried as cargo on a cargo aircraft without a packaging standard in place. No rational reason. This is unacceptable, clearly, and it must end. Together, we're going to double down our efforts to develop packaging standards that will protect against the propagation of a lithium battery fire. And we'll continue to advocate in this area to reach our goals. And what does that mean? When we say we're going to continue to advocate, we're going to keep pushing on the industry working groups. We're going to keep pushing on the legislators. We're going to keep pushing on the regulators, the battery manufacturers, the airlines, the airliner manufacturers, the shippers, the freight forwarders, and anyone and everybody else who has a role in this issue until we get it done. Until we get it done. Next issue, UAS. So we're going to be playing a larger role in the safely integration of unmanned aircraft into the world's busiest airspace system going forward, a larger role. Just last week, the FAA invited aviation industry stakeholders, ALPA included, to participate in the Drone Advisory Committee. Nearly 400 people and organizations expressed an interest in becoming part of this committee, and we were one of the 36 selected. I will represent the association on the committee, which has its first meeting this Friday. We'll discuss the objectives of the committee and the prioritization of the members' issues. Earlier this summer, for example, the FAA released new rules for small UAS. We all saw those. They contain some beneficial safety provisions. But there is work to be done to achieve our goals. We want the FAA to take a stronger stance in ensuring that those who commercially pilot small UAS receive ground and flight training. And let's be clear, all commercial pilots should be held to the same high standard. We're also disappointed that the small UAS rule did not apply to hobbyists or recreational users. And let's be clear, that's not the FAA's choice. That is at Congress's direction, and we're going to change that. We've got to find a way to change that. They are the threat. Next issue is flight time and duty time. In Canada, flight time, duty time regulations have finally advanced after years of inaction. Thanks to a new government in Ottawa and the hard work of the Canada Board, these important science-based rules will soon cover most of our Canadian members. You may have noticed I said most, because we oppose the details in the implementation guidelines that would separate commuter airlines and air taxis into a longer implementation timeframe. These exceptions to the rule would apply to carriers like Bearskin and Wasaya, whose pilots often fly demanding routes to remote areas, just like the pilots for First Air are flying demanding routes to remote areas. But they get a faster implementation timeline than the Bearskin or the Wasaya pilots. Unacceptable. In the U.S., we're going to continue to push for science-based flight and duty time for all cargo operations. Because you've heard this every meeting since we've had this issue come forward after FAR 117. A pilot is a pilot and fatigue is fatigue. It's that simple. Next issue, the fitness for duty arc. Captain Joe DePete, on my left here, our National Safety Coordinator, represented pilots very well in this recent Pilot Fitness for Duty Aviation Rulemaking Committee. We educated ARC members about our pilot assistant programs, and Joe emphasized that increased psychological testing and screening of pilots is not the answer to this issue. And we prevailed. It was a great outcome. Thank you, Joe. Next issue, known crew member. We're making our members' work lives easier, we understand that, by continuing to work with the TSA and expanding the known crew member program. As of today, nearly 65 million crew members have gotten through security using the advanced screening program. With 66 participating airports, 151 known crew member access points, and 54 participating airlines. The next step is to add our Canadian pilots to the system. And we're continuing to work on that. First up on that hit list will be Jazz. As an aside, but an important aside to this issue, at the Air Safety Forum, Transport Canada's Laureen Kinney didn't exactly provide us the answer we'd like to hear on known crew member. It was not a good answer. Rest assured, though, we'll raise the issue with higher levels. You don't get the answer you want, go to their boss. And that's what we're going to do. Higher levels of the Canadian government until we get the answers we need for our crew members with regard to crew member screening in Canada. Next issue is the FFDO program. TSA Administrator Peter Neffinger spoke at this year's Air Safety Forum. I thank him for attending. And he really is very well aware of our priorities, and even encourage us to occasionally poke him. That's his words, poke him, to make sure the agency stays on track. Currently, the TSA is working on getting FFDOs, for example, into the known crew member program. And next year, TSA will start a beta test for FFDOs to use the known crew member system. Now, speaking of FFDOs, we fought very hard, as you all know, for program funding, but we were a little dismayed to discover, after we achieved that program funding, another administrative hurdle. It's now apparent to us that program leads cannot spend all the money that was allocated to them in the program. That's an item we're going to poke the administrator on, and we've already done it once, and we're going to continue to poke him, because that's money we fought hard to get into their program. And if we can't use it to advance the program, it's not doing anyone any good. And it's a very important program because we all know that is our last line of defense. Next issue, FAA reauthorization. So back in July, the President signed a bill that extended the FAA reauthorization through September of next year. Very short period. The extension did address some aviation security initiatives, but one area that is long overdue for attention, and that is the deployment of our secondary barriers. So we have friends on Capitol Hill on this. We do. We have friends on Capitol Hill who are supporting this needed layer of security. But we need more. We need more supporters behind us in the press for secondary barriers. And to be clear, we came very close in making that first step on secondary barriers a reality during the most recent July exercise for the FAA reauthorization. And we're going to double down on our efforts to be successful for the 2017 FAA reauthorization. But overall, the FAA reauthorization bill does very little to address aviation issues. Congress basically kicked the can past the upcoming U.S. elections and said, hey, new Congress, this is your problem. And we'll be pursuing our issues when a new government takes the helm, continuing our legacy of making air travel safer and more secure. It's a very important bill, and we'll be right back at it next summer. So I want to shift gears and turn to our collective bargaining efforts. One of the hardest ALPA jobs I ever had was being a member of my MEC's negotiating committee, primarily because John Malone was the master chairman and he was very difficult to work for. It's the truth, John. But as a result of that experience, I have a deep understanding of the real-world difficulties inherent in bargaining and in abiding respect for our pilot negotiators, staff, and professional support. Over the last year, we have some good news. Through our hard work, we have 11 pilot groups that have successfully concluded deals. Right now, at this moment, 13 of our pilot groups are in negotiations, and 4 are in mediation: Air Wisconsin, Delta, Hawaiian, and Spirit. I'll give an update on these 4 in a minute, but I also will give a short update on a brief, because we have a merger going on as well with Alaska and Virgin America. We know this, but for some, it's a pretty good time to be bargaining. For some, it's a pretty good time to be bargaining. And hopefully the favorable environment we're experiencing right now will continue until the end, until they can conclude their agreements. It's an unknown. Unfortunately, though, even in the 21st century, prosperity does not always bring with it managements that are interested in early, successful collective bargaining. Old-fashioned grit, determination, and membership support activity is still a component for many negotiations, even in the good times, and we're seeing that today. Here's an area where I think we can do a little bit more, by showing up to support our pilot groups that are in negotiation. Every time there's a demonstration, every time there's picketing, every time our members are asked to show up, let's do our best and to have our pilots show up as well from other airlines. Many of you have done this, and I'm very thankful. And we do know what it does to increase morale for the pilot group that's going through the negotiation. It is much appreciated. I do believe we should do more. Before turning to our open contracts, I want to congratulate Island Air. They recently concluded an agreement 6 months, right, Jim? 6 months before their amendable date. They have a unanimously sealed new 3-year contract extension that includes industry-leading pay rates. Industry-leading pay rates. It also eliminates concessions the pilot group made in recent years to keep the airline flying, and included retention bonuses. Congratulations, Jim, on a very well job done. Great job. And in some breaking news, literally overnight, the wholly owned carriers of Envoy and PSA have reached tentative agreements on their wage increases and bonuses. And Bruce tells me that he's working through his, so all 3 of the wholly owns soon will have deals. We're very proud of that. I want to thank the MECs and the ALPA representatives for their hard work, many late nights in the recent weeks to get this done. Dealing with traditional bargaining environment is difficult. Managements take advantage of the RLA practice all the time. The Hawaiian pilots are suffering that right now. They're going to open up their strike center later today, right, Hoon? Later today, marking the first anniversary of their contract's amendable date. They've been bargaining for more than 15 months, but still are far apart on the economic issues. I want to be clear. The pilots of Hawaiian have done everything right. Everything. Their management needs to step up and do the right thing. They're ready. They've done everything right. There is no good reason why the issues have not been resolved. ALPA, as a result, is pressing the National Mediation Board to recognize an impasse, proffer an arbitration under the Railway Labor Act, and leave it to the parties to decide on whether to move into a cooling-off period and start the clock running. The Delta pilots, with an amendable date of last January, have been in mediation for several months. Negotiating teams spent last week in an NMB session to continue addressing their outstanding issues. They've had their strike center up and running since July. Following up on a Labor Day rally in Atlanta, Delta pilots will picket at Detroit and Minneapolis-St. Paul airports tomorrow, and have slated additional picketing events for next week and in October for both New York and Atlanta. And to be clear, they're fighting to raise the bar for all of us at Delta. And I don't think I'm getting out in front of Hoon, Chris, John, or Stuart when I say they're asking for your support at all their upcoming events. Show up and support these pilot groups. Spirit pilots, Stuart, had their first NMB mediation session last week in Fort Lauderdale. They're expected to have future mediation sessions in October 19 through 21 in D.C., and we're cautiously hopeful that this mediation will move along without delay. That's the idea. Also in mediation, as I mentioned, Air Wisconsin pilots. And they're hopeful to be closing in on a deal after years of work, literally years of hard work. I'm hopeful they'll have good news for us in the coming weeks. No pressure, Chris. No pressure. On another front, as I mentioned earlier, we're engaged in another significant merger. Challenging things for the association, truth be told. The Alaska and Virgin America MECs are meeting in Seattle this week, and that is why Joe and Chris are not with us. In hopes of approving a transition process agreement. And as a review, the transition process agreement will lay the foundation to secure a JCBA and an integrated seniority list at those properties. We continue to pursue the goal of bringing pilot groups into ALPA on the organizing front, although both through organizing and mergers with independent unions. We're still in merger discussions with the Aircrew Officers Association of Canada, doing our due diligence. As a reminder, AOA Canada represents Cathay Pacific's 150 pilots that are employed in Canada. Just as we did with our merger with Frontier, we're going to continue to work through the issues. We're not going to give up. Just keep working through the issues. Other organizing and activity in Canada includes a campaign at WestJet, critically important, with the potential to represent 1,300 pilots. The WestJet Organizing Committee is in the process of assessing interests among their pilot group for ALPA representation. Likewise, Porter is also in the assessment phase, and will continue to engage these pilot groups based on the will of their membership to come to ALPA. So shifting gears one last time. Finally and importantly, we must continue to advocate for the airline piloting profession. And what does that mean? We must continue our efforts to deny NAI, enforce our trade agreements with the UAE and Qatar, and ensure there's a thriving profession for those dreaming to become an airline pilot. Let's be clear. It's our duty to defend the entire airline industry against the flag of convenience schemes like Norwegian Air International. We all know the dire consequences that will follow if the Department of Transportation grants NAI's certificate to fly to the U.S. So far, we've been successful in holding NAI at bay, notwithstanding the show cause order that was issued in April. But that's thanks to our pilots and to their engagement. We need to keep that engagement up. Whether it's NAI or ME3, we do have allies. We do. But let's make no mistake. Those allies count on us. We're the major player in the room. ALPA is. We're the major voice speaking out on these issues. ALPA is. And we're the major force dealing with the non-union players. They listen to ALPA. We're the player. And that's because from the beginning of my speech, we are the guardians of this airline piloting profession. People look to us to do that. We are the leaders who are tackling the challenges in this industry. We are carrying the legacy of the profession. The Airline Pilots Association International is on our shoulders. I'd like to close this report as I began. This is a particularly apt time to remind ourselves of who and where we are, who we aspire to be, and what we aspire to be. It's a theme that I suggest we carry over to our MECs and members as we approach and prepare for the Board of Directors meeting. Each of us can play an important role in the successful Board of Directors meeting. So let's prepare to do that. Let's get ready. At this Executive Board meeting and with your MECs over the next few months, next month. Because it's important. Coming prepared is important. Coming ready to do the pilot's business is important. And it's important for this very simple statement, and I'll close with this, because their trust and our authority is derived from them, and it's vested in us. We have to fulfill our duty to our members. Thank you very much.